For more on that issue, we have with us Dr. Jung-yeop from the Sejong Institute. It's good to have you back on the show, Professor.
My pleasure.
So, sanctions seem to be the key issue this week, and North Korea has given their response to the ongoing international sanctions. They're basically saying, bring it. What do you make of this response?
So I think that there are like three purposes that North Korea wanted to show by having this op-ed on its state-run newspaper. First, they want to send a message to its own domestic audiences. Because of this mood in the improved inter-Korean relations, there might be some hope that North Korean citizens might have. So, but since that, given that the denuclearization period will take for a long time, I think North Korean government wants to send a message that you have to endure more time in the future. And second, North Korea wants to send a message to the U.S. that North Korea is not vulnerable because of your pressure on North Korean economy. So they want to have a superior position in negotiating with the United States. And third, by having this kind of argument, North Korea focuses more on sanction issues rather than the declaration to end the war issue. Because now the weight of the discussion is moving toward easing sanctions these days. So I think North Korea probably thought that it might be helpful for them if the discussion is more about the sanctions rather than declaration to end the war.
Well, it seems the U.S. are not backing down either. There are now reports coming out of the Wall Street Journal which says that Washington is also blocking humanitarian aid to aid workers to North Korea as well. A sign perhaps that the U.S. is continuing to have difficulties negotiating a denuclearization program with North Korea. What do you think, Professor?
So basically they are not blocking the humanitarian aid because the current U.S. law banning the travel by the U.S. citizen to North Korea, U.S. government has to issue special passport for those who want to visit North Korea. And so that in the UN Security Council, they have this process of expediting the humanitarian aid to North Korea. But this time, U.S. government is actually blocking U.S. citizens visiting North Korea, even though the purpose of visit is humanitarian aid. So I think that it's political, and also it has a diplomatic purpose because North Korea and the United States is now going to have a second summit in the near future. So United States wants to put more pressure on North Korea as the second summit between Trump and Kim is forthcoming soon. So I think U.S. is not sending a message that they are going to block humanitarian itself, but the citizen of the U.S. citizens are still under the U.S. law banning the travel to North Korea. At the same time, that U.S. still wants to maintain the maximum pressure to North Korea.
So it seems both the U.S. and North Korea are giving pressure on each other with these various kind of statements and actions as well. But from this situation, can there be a second a summit? Can there be talks going on underneath that are moving towards some sort of plan for denuclearization, do you think?
So I think that both leaders have strong incentive to have and continue the dialogue with each other. For President Trump, it is very important for him to show his success in diplomatic area. And for Kim Jong-un, and I think it's very important for him to continue to this charm offense or the engaging with the United States to ultimately achieve the easing sanctions for North Korean economy. So I think there's still incentive for both the leaders, but since the deliverables out of summit is very important, that is why they are still have this kind of small battles before the summit to achieve more deliverables for their own interest, respectively.
So this situation right now comes, of course, while in the middle of this week, the Moon administration continued to try and sort out this controversial situation over comments made by the Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-wha, who said Seoul was reviewing its sanctions on North Korea. The Seoul has pretty much backtracked on this, saying that there is no formal kind of review on this, but that they will still stay flexible. Trump, of course, reacted rather undiplomatically, saying that South Korea can make no decision without US approval. How damaging is this recent incident to the US-South Korea alliance? Isn't it? Don't they need to be on the same side at the moment?
I think every alliance system has their own area of conflicts. For South Korea and the United States currently has the problems or the differences in their opinions how to deal with North Korea. So now South Korean government believe that easing the sanctions might lead to the ultimate denuclearization of North Korea, whereas U.S. government believes that easing the sanctions actually blocked any possibility of denuclearization of North Korea. That is why it is so sensitive when Minister Kang mentioned during the National Assembly audit that South Korean government is actually considering the easing sanctions, which is May 21st measure, which was made in 2010. And as you just mentioned, the President Trump mentioned that South Korea would not do anything without their approval. But I think the question from the journalist to the President Trump is not about South Korean measures. The question was South Korean government is considering the easing sanctions. So I think President Trump probably mentioned that any waiver to the sanctions should be approved by the U.S. government or the UN Security Council. So I think it's not diplomatic, but we should not think that there's like big problems between two governments.
So you don't think there's going to be some sort of slight lasting animosity there at all?
I don't think so. Yeah, there's a conflict, arguments, and disputes, even the close allies. But they have strong histories in the past that they can manage these kind of issues.
President Moon will be setting off for a 9-day trip around Europe from Saturday. So the Blue House said he will try to garner support from the EU to EU countries on North Korea. The question is, what message do you think he will be sending to them? Because, I mean, do you think President Moon has any intention to maybe discuss with certain countries, especially France, who's a UN Security Council member, about sanctions, about possibly starting to ease sanctions? Do you think that's on the cards yet? Or do you think that is something else that he will talk to them about later?
President Moon already made a speech at the UN General Assembly last month that international community has to respond positively to the efforts made by North Korea. And what he meant at the speech was that since North Korea is putting their efforts into the denuclearization and opening their society and the economy, international community should reward them. So he did not, President Moon did not specify what that reward is, but many observers thought that that reward might be easing some kind of sanctions. So I think that President Moon is going to reiterate his message that was given at the UN National Assembly last month, but it's going to be very politically difficult for him to directly ask EU countries that they have to ease the sanctions on North Korea.
Russia and North Korea have announced that its leaders, Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, exchanged messages to mark the 70th anniversary of their bilateral ties. And also earlier this week as well, there was Choi Sun-hee, the Vice Foreign Minister. She went to Moscow to meet and had a trilateral meeting with her Chinese and Russian counterparts, where they released a joint communique, also calling on the need for possible adjustment on international sanctions on North Korea. So all this sanctions-related pressure is coming out from that side as well. Do you think that Kim Jong-un is now really trying to coordinate his countries, his allies, China and Russia, to kind of fight against these sanctions pressure as well?
So we have observed this kind of diplomatic efforts by North Korea this year. So when North Korea decided to have a summit with the United States, the first diplomatic efforts that they put is reestablish its relations with China and Russia. So the relationship between North Korea and China has been so cold, and there is no like formal exchange at the government level last year. But I think that North Korea needs the strong support from two close countries like China and Russia to have a negotiation with the United States. So there's going to be a second summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim. North Korea needs to reestablish its ties with China and Russia, and also garner their support for having voices on easing the sanctions at the UN Security Council. So I think from North Korean point of view, it's very natural for him to have this kind of diplomatic efforts.
And one other development that's happened today as well, it's been announced that high-level inter-Korean talks will take place next week at Panmunjom. Now, this comes, without, a little bit of a surprise, but what do you think they will talk about? What is the subject that they are trying to sort out now?
So the Ministry of Unification said that it's the discussions at the high-level talks next week is about to follow up the Panmunjom Declaration and the details of North Korea's performance group performing in Seoul in October, and also a lot of detailed discussion on how to make unitary sports team in the upcoming sports events in the Asia. So I think it's not about denuclearization of North Korea issues, but focus is more given to the inter-Korean relations and the follow-up of Panmunjom and Pyongyang joint declarations.
And finally, let's touch upon one more subject. So President Trump, during an interview with on Fox and Friends in the U.S. on Thursday, he bragged about his good relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and stressing how there had been no missile or nuclear tests in the last year. He also described Pompeo as a star for going to North Korea, and again for trying to arrange future talks for another summit. Now, it seems to be that he's really as he's coming up to these midterm elections that are so important to him, that he's pounding out his achievements on North Korea. But Dr. Hu, just as an overall assessment, how do you review his achievements on North Korea so far this year?
So it is a progress that North Korea has not made any provocations with regard to its nuclear and missile capabilities. So I think we should admit that it's achievement by Trump administration. But at the same time that it's not enough for us to consider that North Korea is in the direction of denuclearization yet. Because for the true denuclearization of North Korea, there's a certain process that we have to follow, and North Korea is not exactly in that step yet. So President Trump wants to show off that this is what he achieved, which has not been possible by the previous administration, and that is why he emphasized the differences between him and the previous administration of the United States for the domestic political purpose. So I think that we have to see how the second summit between Trump and Kim is going to turn out. But so far, I think that it is true that the progress has been made, but there are a lot of work has to be done in the future.
That's where we'll wrap it up. Thank you for coming in today and giving us your thoughts on everything as well.
Thank you.